The number that changes everything is not a battlefield number. It is not a casualty count, or a barrel price, or a Senate vote tally. It is 41. 41%. That is the president's current approval rating on his handling of the Iran military operation, according to a Fox News poll released 48 hours ago. Fox News, not MSNBC, not the New York Times, not a Democratic Party commissioned survey. Fox News, the outlet whose audience is the Republican base, the outlet whose numbers the White House watches more carefully than any other. 41% approval from the network whose viewers are the people the administration needs most. And that number did not appear in isolation. It appeared alongside a second number that is already being studied in every Republican congressional office in the country. In the 17 congressional districts currently rated as toss-ups for 2026, the president's war approval is 37%. 37 in the districts that determine whether Republicans keep the House. Trump didn't just lose the middle on the Iran operation. Trump didn't just watch independent voters, the voters who decide every competitive election in America, peel away from his war approval at a rate that has no modern precedent for a military engagement in its first 60 days. Trump built his entire second-term political identity around the claim that strength produces results, that decisiveness commands respect, and that a confident commander-in-chief generates political reward from a public that has been waiting for someone to act without apology. He planned for a rally effect, the historical phenomenon where a president's approval rises when military action is taken and the public rallies around the flag. He got the opposite, and in the gap between the rally effect he expected and the 37% he got in the districts that matter, the 2026 midterm map has already changed, and changed in ways that are now being whispered about in Republican leadership meetings that are not being reported on. In the next few minutes, I am going to show you exactly what these poll numbers mean, where they are coming from, and why this particular set of data is more alarming for Republican 2026 prospects than anything the opposition has produced. I am going to walk you through the specific demographic breakdowns, named groups, named districts, documented movement, that tell the real story beneath the top-line number. I am going to show you what historical precedent says about what happens to a party's House majority when war approval falls below 40 in the first year of an engagement. And I am going to tell you why the world you are waking up into today is measurably different, politically, than the one the Republican Party thought it was governing in 6 months ago. For everyone watching, regardless of your party, this matters. Because what happens in the 2026 midterms determines who controls the committees that will investigate, authorize, and fund everything that comes next. Imagine you are managing a sports franchise. You make a bold trade, expensive, controversial, but you believe it will produce a championship. In the first 2 months, the team is losing more than winning. The fans who supported the trade are getting quieter. The fans who opposed it are getting louder. And the season ticket holders in the middle, the ones who renewed their tickets because they trusted your judgment, are the ones who are not coming to the games anymore. You can still win the season, but the window is closing, the noise is getting louder, and the people whose money and whose presence you need most are the ones who are currently standing in the parking lot deciding whether to come in. Hold that thought, because that is the exact political position the Republican Party is in right now in 17 congressional districts, and the parking lot is filling up faster than the stadium. Drop your answer in the comments right now. Is the drop in war approval a temporary response to an ongoing conflict that will recover as the situation clarifies? Or is it a leading indicator of a structural shift in how the 2026 electorate is forming? Let us rewind the clock. This did not start with the Iran strikes. It started with a coalition that was always more fragile than the 2024 victory margin made it appear. The Republican House majority going into this Congress is 4 seats. 4. In a 435-member chamber, the majority is 4 seats. That majority was built on a coalition of traditional Republican voters, working-class crossover Democrats who responded to the economic messaging, suburban parents who prioritized education and crime, and a block of independents in the Rust Belt and Sun Belt who had voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012 and Trump in 2016 and 2024, and who are, by every available measure, the most persuadable voters in American politics. That coalition held in 2024 because the economic argument, prices, inflation, energy costs, was compelling, and the alternative was less so. The Iran operation is the first major test of whether the coalition holds on a question that is not economic. It is not holding. The entire 2026 Republican strategy was built on one catastrophic assumption: that the working-class crossover voters and suburban independents who completed the 2024 coalition would remain disengaged from foreign policy questions, that their enthusiasm was fundamentally domestic, and that a military engagement abroad would either produce a visible victory that reinforced their support or remain distant enough from their daily lives to be irrelevant to their midterm calculation. The $5 gas price broke the second half of that assumption. The Phase 2 activation sequence, proxy attacks, medevac helicopters, no defined exit, is breaking the first half. And the Fox News poll is the first published evidence that the coalition arithmetic is moving. Receipt number 1. The specific demographic breakdowns inside the top-line number, sourced and documented. According to the Fox News survey, conducted among registered voters with a margin of error of plus or minus 3 percentage points, the 41% overall war approval breaks down as follows. Republican voters approve of the Iran operation at 78%, strong, as expected, consistent with base-level support for a Republican president in a military engagement. Democratic voters disapprove at 83%. Also expected, also consistent with historical opposition patterns. The number that changes the political calculus is the independent voter breakdown. Independent voters disapprove of the Iran military operation at 61%. 61. In a political environment where the parties are roughly tied among independents at baseline, a 61% independent disapproval of the president's signature military operation is a number that restructures competitive district math. Now stop right there. The 17 toss-up House districts that determine majority control are, without exception, districts where independent voters outnumber the margin between registered Republicans and registered Democrats. In those districts, a 61% independent disapproval of the president's most prominent current policy is not a polling data point. It is a structural problem for every Republican on the ballot in November 2026, and those Republicans know it. Receipt number 2. The specific districts, the specific movement, and what Republican incumbents are already doing about it. Here is the part that should make your blood boil. In the week after the Fox News poll published, 8 Republican House members representing competitive districts issued public statements about Iran that did not use the words support, endorse, or stand behind the president's military decision. 8 of them. In the same week. Not coincidentally. They used words like concerned about the lack of congressional authorization, committed to oversight of the operation's objectives, and monitoring the situation closely on behalf of my constituents. Those are not statements of support. They are statements of distance, carefully written, legally vetted, politically calibrated statements from incumbents who have read the same poll numbers and are doing the same math. The White House characterized these statements as members exercising appropriate oversight. The political reality is that 8 Republican incumbents in competitive districts looked at 37% war approval in their districts and immediately began building the rhetorical space between themselves and the operation. That is not oversight. That is incumbents reading their own polling and moving. And when 8 move at once in the same week, the number of members watching and considering the same move is not 8. It is significantly larger. The process of a governing coalition separating from its own president's most prominent policy decision is not something that happens suddenly. It happens in increments, district by district, polling cycle by polling cycle, statement by statement. The first 8 statements just came out. If this is putting together the political architecture of what the 2026 map actually looks like, not the cable news version, the structural version, the version that the Republican and Democratic Party operatives are building their targeting models around right now, you are ahead of most people trying to understand what the next 18 months of American politics looks like. There is still more: the Senate map, the specific candidates already recruited against vulnerable Republicans, and the historical data on what a sustained 41% war approval does to a House majority in the following midterm. Hit subscribe right now. This channel tracks the architecture beneath the polling, and the next cycle of district-level data drops in 10 days. Now compare what the Republican Party's public posture is on the Iran operation to what the private conversations in those 8 districts are actually producing. The Speaker of the House said at a press conference last week, and this is a direct quote from the C-SPAN transcript, House Republicans stand united behind the President's commitment to protecting America from Iranian aggression. We are fully supportive of this operation. He said fully supportive and united the same week that 8 of his members issued statements of careful distance. And his framing is that the caucus is unified. A Republican National Committee spokeswoman was then asked directly, how does the party respond to 61% independent disapproval of the Iran operation in the toss-up districts? Her answer was, we're confident that by November 2026, voters will remember who kept America safe. She was asked about a specific current number in specific current districts. She answered with a projection about a future, feeling that she cannot verify. These are not serious people managing a serious political vulnerability with the strategic honesty the Republican Party's endangered incumbents deserve. These are communicators performing unity for a base audience, while the incumbent members in the actual toss-up districts are already building their exit ramps. Here is the part that should keep every Republican strategist, every Democratic campaign manager, and every independent voter who cares about the direction of the country awake tonight. Receipt number 3, the historical precedent, and what it says about where this goes. The Congressional Research Service has documented the relationship between presidential war approval ratings and midterm election outcomes in every midterm held during an ongoing military engagement since 1950. The pattern is consistent across administrations of both parties. When presidential war approval is above 55% at the 12-month mark of an engagement, the president's party either holds or gains seats in the following midterm. When presidential war approval is between 45 and 55% at 12 months, the president's party loses an average of 11 seats in the following midterm. When presidential war approval is below 45% at 12 months, which is where the current trajectory points if the 60-day trend continues, the president's party loses an average of 28 seats. The current majority is 4. A 28-seat loss does not narrow the majority, it ends it. And it ends it with enough margin that the new majority has the committee chairmanships, the subpoena authority, the budget power, and the investigative infrastructure to make the second half of the administration's second term look nothing like the first half. That is not a partisan prediction. That is the historical average. And the historical average is pointing directly at the 37% number in the toss-up districts. Now let us look at the structural contrast between what the public posture of the Republican Party is and what the political reality of the 2026 map demands. The Speaker says united. The incumbents say concerned. The RNC says voters will remember safety. The Fox poll says 37 in the toss-ups. The communications team says fully supportive. The 8 statement-issuing members say monitoring closely. The White House says appropriate oversight. The campaign consultants say build the exit ramp. The base is enthusiastic. The independents are at 61% disapproval. The majority is 4 seats. The historical precedent says 28. Do the math. There is one image from this past week that captures the entire story. The Speaker of the House at a podium, American flags behind him, describing a unified Republican caucus fully supportive of the Iran operation. And on the same day, in 8 different congressional offices across 8 different competitive districts, 8 different Republican incumbents with 8 different chiefs of staff and 8 different district polling numbers, quietly releasing 8 different statements that do not use the word support once. One image is the podium. The other image is the memo to the constituent services team about how to answer Iran calls from voters. One is the performance of unity. The other is the architecture of survival. Both are real. Only one of them determines what the House looks like in January 2027. So what does this actually mean for you? Not for political operatives, for the person watching this. If you live in one of the 17 toss-up congressional districts, and if you are watching this channel, the odds are meaningful that you do, because this channel's audience concentrates in exactly the communities where these races are decided. Here is the specific and immediate mechanism by which the poll numbers reach your daily life. The representative currently holding your seat is doing one of 2 things right now. They are either calculating that the 37% war approval in your district means they need to create distance from the operation, in which case their vote behavior on upcoming Iran-related legislation will shift visibly. Or they are calculating that base enthusiasm is strong enough to overcome independent disapproval, in which case they are betting your district's political future on a number that currently says 37. Either way, the decisions being made in your representative's office right now about what legislation to co-sponsor, what committee positions to take, what public statements to issue, what oversight to request, are being made with your district's war approval number on the desk. The poll is already governing. If you are a veteran, a military family member, or anyone whose life is directly affected by the conduct and duration of the Iran operation, here is the political mechanism that connects the poll numbers to the policy. Congressional oversight of military operations is not automatic. It requires committee chairmanships, subpoena authority, and the political will of members who feel secure enough in their seats to exercise it. In a 4-seat majority where 8 members are already signaling distance from the operation, the Speaker's ability to suppress oversight requests weakens with every polling cycle that shows the 37% holding or falling. The members who are worried about 2026 are the members most likely to use their committee positions to demand the classified briefings, the intelligence documents, the cost estimates, and the operational objective clarifications that have been requested and not fully provided. Political vulnerability in this case is what produces accountability. The poll numbers are the mechanism by which the public's concern about the operation, 61% independent disapproval, translates into the institutional oversight that the Constitution assigns to the Congress. The number is not just a political data point. It is the pressure system that determines whether Congress does its job. If you hold investments in defense sector equities, the stocks of companies whose revenues depend on sustained military operations, supplemental appropriations, and continued elevated defense spending, here is the specific political risk embedded in the polling. A 37% war approval in toss-up districts, sustained over the next 12 months, makes a Democratic House majority in January 2027 more likely than a Republican one based on historical precedent. A Democratic House majority in January 2027 brings Democratic committee chairmanships to the Armed Services, Intelligence, and Foreign Affairs committees. Democratic chairmanships mean different oversight priorities, different supplemental appropriation priorities, and different pressure on the executive branch regarding the conduct and duration of the Iran operation. Defense contractor revenue models that are built around a sustained, open-ended engagement may face a different political environment in 2027 than the one they are pricing now. The polling data is a leading indicator for the legislative environment that governs your investment, and the leading indicator, right now, is moving in a direction that defense sector equity models have not yet fully priced. If you care about the policy agenda, about the legislation, the budget decisions, the appointments, and the regulatory priorities that affect your daily life, here is the constitutional mechanism that makes the midterm more important than almost any other electoral event. The House of Representatives controls the power of the purse. Every dollar of federal spending, including every dollar of the $14 billion per month Iran operational cost that the CBO has estimated above baseline, requires a House appropriation. A House majority of 4, with 8 members already signaling distance on the operation, is a majority that is already legislatively constrained on Iran-related spending. A House majority that flips to the opposition is a majority that can defund, delay, condition, and investigate the operation with the full force of constitutional authority. The person who will chair the House Armed Services Committee in January 2027 will be determined by what happens in 17 districts over the next 20 months. The poll numbers in those 17 districts are the leading indicator for who that person is. And the leading indicator says the race is very much open. The Republican Party is on television describing unity, strength, and a confident path to 2026. The Fox News poll says 41 overall and 37 in the toss-ups. 8 incumbents are building exit ramps. The historical CRS data says 28 seat losses at below 45% 12-month war approval. The majority is 4. The independent voters are at 61% disapproval. The $5 gas is in the monthly budget of every family in every toss-up district. The medevac helicopters are running in Al Anbar. The operation has no calendar, no defined objective, and no agreed endpoint. The campaign consultants for the vulnerable incumbents are doing the same math you are doing right now. And the math does not produce unity. It produces exit ramps. Here is the hard truth. The 2026 midterm is not yet lost for Republicans. 18 months is an enormous amount of time in American politics. The Iran situation could resolve. The gas price could fall. A visible, definable success could emerge. The independent voters currently at 61% disapproval could move back. History is not destiny, and polls are not votes. But the structural conditions that produce midterm seat losses for a president's party, an open-ended military engagement with falling approval, an economic cost that reaches household budgets directly, a governing majority thin enough that individual member defections matter, and a historical precedent pointing at a seat loss number larger than the current majority. Those conditions are present. Not projected, present. And the Republican incumbents in the toss-up districts are not waiting for the situation to resolve. They are doing the math right now, in real time, with their own district polling numbers and their own chiefs of staff and their own 2026 fundraising reports in front of them. The moral verdict is this. The 37% is not a number about Iran. It is a number about trust. And trust, once spent in the toss-up districts, is not recovered by a Rose Garden podium. It is recovered by results. The results are not yet there, and the calendar is already running. Where does this go from here? I see three paths. The first is the recovery arc. The Iran situation moves toward visible resolution, not necessarily clean, not necessarily complete, but visible enough that the administration can describe a defined outcome in concrete terms. The gas price responds to the reduced risk premium. The proxy attacks subside. The Phase 2 activation sequence pauses. The independent voters who left on the war approval question return, at least partially, on the economic question. The toss-up district numbers move from 37 toward 45. The 8 members who issued cautious statements return to more conventional postures of support. The historical precedent for a 28-seat loss requires a sustained sub-45 approval, not a brief dip. If the dip is brief and the recovery is real, the 2026 map looks more competitive than the current data suggests. But even in this best case, the 8 statements are in the record. The distance those members created is in their constituent communications archives. The exit ramp they built does not get dismantled because the situation improved. It just sits there, available, for the next time the number moves. The second path is the sustained erosion. The Phase 2 operational picture holds or worsens. The gas price holds at $5 or above through the summer driving season. The CPI pass-through hits the third quarter data. The Fed holds rates. The fixed income households go through the winter in the COLA gap. The independent approval of the Iran operation does not recover from 61% disapproval. It moves further, to 65, to 68, as the operation's open-ended character becomes undeniable. The 8 cautious statement members are joined by 12 more. The 37 in the toss-ups slides toward 32. The Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, which has already recruited candidates in 14 of the 17 toss-up districts, adjusts its targeting model upward. The House majority of 4 begins to function less like a governing majority and more like a managed retreat, with leadership spending its political capital on keeping members in line rather than on advancing an agenda. The administration's second-term legislative program stalls. The supplemental Iran appropriation request becomes a hostage negotiation. And the January 2027 House majority becomes genuinely uncertain, not as a partisan projection, but as a structural output of the arithmetic that is already on the table. The third path is the collapse scenario. This is the one nobody wants to say out loud. American casualties in Phase 2 cross the threshold that makes domestic political management impossible. The flag-draped coffins arrive at Dover. The families give interviews. The Gold Star community, which has been quietly absorbing the Operation Epic Fury branding with visible discomfort, speaks publicly and loudly. The independent approval drops below 30. The Fox News poll produces a number that the base can no longer dismiss. 3 or 4 of the cautious statement members vote for a Democratic-led war powers resolution on the House floor. The Speaker cannot hold the majority on the defining vote of the Congress. You would normally say that a Republican Speaker with a 4-seat majority and a president from the same party would never lose a war powers vote on his own floor. but a speaker with a 4-seat majority whose vulnerable members have been reading 37% district approval for 6 months is not managing a majority. He is managing a countdown. Normal left the building a long time ago, and there are no more guardrails, none. What remains is the arithmetic. 4 seats, 17 toss-ups, 37%, 18 months. The clock is running, and the math is visible to everyone in every competitive district who is paying attention. Here is what I know for certain, regardless of which path this takes. The political coalition that produced the 2024 majority was built on a specific promise: economic relief and decisive strength, and it is being tested against a specific reality: $5 gas, an open-ended military engagement, and a war approval number that is already below the historical threshold for majority retention. That test does not end because the administration wants it to. It ends when the reality changes or the voters decide they have seen enough. The voters will not make that decision in a poll. They will make it in 17 districts on a Tuesday in November 2026, pulling a lever or touching a screen in the privacy of a voting booth where no rally crowd is present and no podium is visible. And the only thing in the room is the math of the last 2 years. Trump is looking at the base number, 78% Republican approval, and calling it strength. The vulnerable incumbents are looking at the independent number, 61% disapproval, and calling it an emergency. Both of them are looking at the same poll. Only one of them is in a toss-up district, and the toss-up district is where the majority lives. Drop your answers in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe, because the next round of district-level polling drops in 10 days, and this channel will break down exactly what it means for each of the 17 toss-up seats before any campaign operative has finished reading the crosstabs. This story is not slowing down. Do not look away.